Hi, so in this tutorial we have two more pieces of art to make and we will have everything covered. The two things are the thrusters for the rocket and the landing pad. So let's get started. Let's look over here at the paint.net. Let's create a new one. And let's do 800 by 600. Let's make the landing pad. That should be pretty straightforward. Now, really all I'm going to focus on for the landing pad is just sort of the surface. And I thought it might be kind of cool to do a little like a helipad kind of thing, but only for rockets. So I'm going to do a, let's do a shape tool. We'll do an ellipse. And then I'm going to fill that in. Actually, I'm already making a mistake. We should start with a new image and let's create a background here. We'll call this the landing pad. Alright, and so back to our shapes tool, got our ellipse. I'm doing yellow. Again, you can make whatever shape you want, make it whatever image you want. And I'm going to fill that in with some yellow. And I think I'm going to do maybe like a letter right in the center. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to go back a layer and I'm going to add this as a separate layer in case I want to move it around. So yeah, back to text, and then I'm going to put this right in here, and I'm going to do like R for rocket, and that is totally invisible because I believe it's set to yellow. So we'll switch it to black. Yeah. Sure, like some cool space fonts, and that's something you can totally add to your project if you like. Make that much bigger. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm going to move that to be a little more centered there. Maybe an L would be better for landing pad. Okay, and I'm going to save that image. Landing pad. And let's save it as a PNG. Save that there. Okay. Yep. Okie dokie. Now we need our thrusters. So let's do another new scene here, and let's do this again, 800 by 600. Now, for my rocket, your rocket may be different. For mine, I have the single thruster, which is going to make things simpler. And I'm going to draw my thing again with a paintbrush, and I'm going to go for that sort of orangey color as well. I'm going to do orange and red this time. And so if you look at my rocket, you know, it's got this little thruster here. We're going to make use of that by putting an effect on that. So let's just draw some little fire. So again, let's see, let's drop this down to maybe like a 6, and I'm going to make just kind of a little rocket shape. Just finish that off. Then I'm going to fill that in. And drat, I wished I hadn't done that. I needed to make another layer, so let's make another layer. And let's call this engine 1. And yeah, we can just, yeah, we can hit duplicate layer. Let's do that. And then that way, this engine level. Get rid of that. We'll rename this engine 1, and that way we can basically disable. No, that's not going to work. We are going to just go back to the new image start point, and we're just going to start over. Okay, so let's make a new background. We'll call this engine 1. There we go. And then come to our paintbrush. I've got orange selected. I'm going to draw that shape again, only this time I think I'll do it a little bit bigger. Got room. Okay, then I'm going to fill that in. And I'm going to make another layer and call this engine 2. And then I'm going to try to make it just slightly darker. And then I'm going to go back to my paintbrush. And again, I'm going to just try to make it just slightly bigger. Okay. All right. We'll call that engine 2. All right, so I'm going to turn off my background. I'm going to turn off engine 2, and I'm going to file save as engine 1, and I'm going to save it as a PNG. Okay, and yep, that's fine, and yes, it's okay to flatten, and then we will just move back a step, and then we'll turn engine 2 on, and we'll save that as engine 2. And we want it to be a PNG. Yep, flattening is okay, and we're done. So back to Unity. Now all those things we added have now appeared in our art folder. So let's get engine 1 and engine 2 and landing pad and turn all those into sprites. Just drop that down and then hit apply. Now landing pad is a bit interesting. I'm going to, I think just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to create an art object for this as well. And I'm going to make an empty game object and parent it to that one. I'm going to call this the art file. And I'm going to add a sprite renderer to that. And I'm going to put landing pad on there. And for some reason the landing pad has its background turned on, and we don't want that. But since we're here, let's go ahead and try to get this resized to be more appropriate. Yeah, I think what happened is that it inherited the settings of the landing pad. So I'm just going to delete this object. And I'm going to create an empty game object right now, just away from the landing pad. Sometimes when you create objects that are parented to other ones, they inherit the size, scale, position of that object. So we're going to just start here with like landing pad art. And then we'll put a sprite renderer on this one. And then we will add landing pad here. Now it still does have its white background, which we have to fix, but we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, let's rotate this one. And I'm going to rotate it manually, just close, and then I need to move this to 90 degrees. Okay, and now let's try to put it closer into position on that landing pad. We're just going to put it right on top. Again, this is not a way a real artist would do it. This is going to get us into the ballpark. The idea is that I really only want that yellow symbol there at the top. So now here we're at 472.7. Yeah, and that looks like that's about the right height for it to sit on top there. I would like to get rid of this white though, so let's go back over to our landing pad and let's not flatten that. I didn't turn off the background. That's the problem. Okay, so now let's do a save as, landing pad, PNG. We can just copy right over that. Yes, we do want to replace it. Voila. Now, I also noticed that last time I was playing that the landing pad was a little dark. So let's add some lights. First though, let's connect this landing pad art to the object there. Now it's one thing. And then let's create some point lights to give it a little ambiance. So right click on the landing pad and then there's a light object here called a point light. Here's our point light. Yeah. Now you can have some fun with this. Like it's set as white. You can change it to be different kind of mysterious colors. Like if you want it to be, you know, like a greener color, or maybe you want it to be purple. I think for me, white's just fine. Maybe a little yellow in there wouldn't be all that bad. And then you can change the range, how far that light is cast. You can also change the intensity, so it's a bit brighter or a bit dimmer, depending on what you want. And you know, the distance away from the light source, the paddle, change values as well. Okay. So that's our landing pad. Now let's do our rocket engines. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a art object to hold the engine sprite. Just to make this go faster, I'm going to copy rocket art and I'm going to paste it. Okay, so you see now I have rocket art. I'm going to rename this engine. And then I'm going to go over here to the sprite renderer and I'm going to change this to engine 1. And then there's our engine object show up, right? And that is way too big. I'm going to get it into position roughly. And now I'm going to resize it. And I'm just going to sort of fiddle with it until I find sort of the, yeah, that's maybe a little too small. Maybe we want it to be just a bit bigger. Kind of get it into place there. There we go. Yeah. Okay. It's going to need animation as well. We are not going to need it to explode. Let's change that explode to something a little more generic like animate. And then just right click where it says explode, transition event, animate. And for us, we don't need all these frames. We actually only need 2 frames. So let's get rid of 3, 4, 5, and 6. But we do want frame 1 and 2. Let's connect frame 1 and 2 together. Because we really only have two frames. We have the small one and the large one. So let's change this to engine 1 and change this to engine 2. Okay. And this is set in our wait timer. Okay, so that's ready to be animated. We need to send a script to this object to tell it to animate. But we're also going to want it to stop occasionally too. This is not a once and done kind of thing. So here's a stop state. In fact, actually, let's actually not do this. Let's copy frame 2. Just copy that object and paste it, and then rename it stop. And then remove this wait timer and remove that finish state. Just right click on finished and hit delete transition. And then we want a new event called stop. So add that, and then we're going to add that as a global transition, stop. Okay, and then the sprite we want to set this to is none. Okay, So that's our animation script for the engine. All right. Also, probably for startup, we probably should set this sprite to be blank on startup. So you can copy this action and come over here to init and put it here. That way when the game starts off and the rocket isn't moving, it will turn this sprite off, but at least it's there for us while we're in editing mode to be able to see where it is. That's kind of important. Okay, so we also need a controller for this animation. We only want the engine to come on when there's fuel and when the player is pressing an input button. So let's add another FSM. Let's right click in the empty gray area, add FSM component, new FSM, and let's call this FSM animation controller. Okay. Now, the animation controller is listening for the player to provide input, and when input is given, then we want to turn the thrusters on. So this first one is actually kind of a thing called input listener. So let's just call it input listener. And then when it hears input given, it's going to turn the thrusters on. And then immediately after turning the thrusters on, it's going to start animating them. But if maybe like just a fraction of a second later, it's going to check to see if input is still being given. Check for input. And if it finds that the input is still being given, then it can keep animating. If it's not, it needs to stop. So we will add in a stop state. Okay, so let's connect these. Let's make an event called input. All right, and then let's just go ahead and have the action for that as well. Do an access event. If any direction is given, we're going to send input. And then when we get here, we're going to say, hey, thrusters on. And the way we do that, remember we have this script here, animation. We have an event waiting called animate. So from here, we're going to send an event to that script. So type in send event by name. And then we are going to send this to ourselves, the owner, but it's to a different script, and we're sending it to the animation. And that animation, or that event, was called animate. And then we're just going to wait for just a fraction of a second. Let's put that way at the bottom. So we're going to wait just 0.1 seconds, and then we're going to go on to the, just to make sure input is still being given. Okay, so animate, wait 0.1 seconds, check for input. Now we have this access event over here, right? So let's just copy that and paste it right here. And it says, okay, any direction, if there's any direction given, it means we're still animating. So we are going to add one more state here, and we're going to just do check again. Yeah. And then, so what we can do is we can say, hey, any direction is being given. It means that the player still has the button pressed. We're going to send input, right? So we can click here to add that transition, and we're going to check again. And let's put in a small wait timer here as well. And we'll do 0.1 as well, and then we'll send finished. Okay, so what happens here is it says, hey, animate. Actually, let's start back here. Check for any kind of input. It finds some. It turns the animation on. So now our engine effect is going to be switching back and forth between small and large really, really quickly to make it look like the thrusters are burning. And then it's going to move into this state where it's looking for any input. If it finds any input, it's going to go over here, wait 0.0 seconds, and it's going to check again. But what happens when there isn't any input? Well, there's a thing called no direction given. So let's do a no direction, and we'll call that stop, right? And it's yelling at us that we haven't hooked that up, but you can click right here to add it. And then here we will go to thrusters off. And similar to what we did here where we sent animate, let's copy this action, bring it right back down here, and let's say stop, right? And then we can then hit a finish state and move right back to the beginning. And what stop is doing is it's coming to here and it's hitting stop, and we've got this empty sprite here, so it'll turn that object off. So again, listening for any input from the player, and it sends input, comes here, it starts the animation, it waits for 0.1 seconds, then it comes here and it listens for either any direction or no direction. If it finds something, so the player's pressing a button, it's going to come here and it's going to just check again. Meanwhile, on this other script animation, this is still cycling one after the other. Okay, and then if it finds no input given, then it's going to come to here and it's going to say, hey, animation, stop. The animation turns off, and then it goes back to this state where it's just going to hang out and listen for the player to press a button again. And that's all well and good until we run out of fuel. So if the player runs out of fuel, we need to stop the thrusters, the animation part. So over here in out of fuel, we need to disable that FSM. So I'm going to copy this action and paste it. And I'm going to change this to specify game owner. And I'm going to put the engine in here. And we want to turn off the animation controller. We probably also ought to actually, you know what the easiest thing to do would be to do is we could just turn this engine off. We just turn it right off, and that will both stop any kind of other interaction. It'll also turn off the art. If it was thrusters were on and then suddenly ran out of fuel, then we wouldn't have to worry about the art being in place. So let's do that instead. Let's do an activate game object, and then let's just turn that whole piece of art off by dragging the engine into here. Okay, so let's give it a try. Yeah, now I'm just tapping and stopping. And a very gentle landing, and we win. So this concludes the tutorial for the moon lander. There's still plenty to do. There's lots of things you could do to improve all this. You can improve your art. There's a lot of level design that could be done to make this more challenging. You can have a whole lot of fun putting in all sorts of just different kinds of adjustments to the speed and to the fuel. Tons of places where you could take this. I hope you enjoyed it.